This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website for the radio side, where you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365, is www.xzoneradiotv.com. Just a little bit of news before we start. I received an email from Ed Till, the CEO and president of the Starcom radio network, who informed me that a good friend of ours, Jan Starks, who was the founder and the former person in charge of Starcom, passed away. I have had the pleasure of working with Jan over the years in broadcasting. He was a visionary, and he leaves behind his wife Linda, family, and friends all around this world. So Linda, from everyone here at the X-Zone Radio Show, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, and all the members of the X-Zone Nation around the world, our love, our prayers, and our condolences are with you, Jan's family, and all the members and friends that Jan was so graciously able to touch, and he's changed so many lives. He will really be missed. My guest this hour, X-Zone Nation, is Stephen HAIRFIELD, and after being raised in a very dysfunctional family, Stephen entered the U.S. Army and found himself in Vietnam for 2 tours of duty. While there, he met his first teachers, the path of Zen Buddhist monks, where he learned of intuitive insight. He began to learn their teachings and traditions and spent as much time with them as the military would allow. Upon returning to the U.S., he earned his undergraduate degree in the field of psychology, and upon graduation found himself with an urge to travel to India. Upon his arrival in India, he began the journey of his life after encountering 2 Tibetan monks who invited him to come and learn in northern India, where he spent 6 years studying. I believe, Stephen, it's called Mahayana?
That works.
Okay,
yes.
That works. Joining me now is Stephen HAIRFIELD. And Stephen, welcome back to the X-Zone. It is always a pleasure talking to you. Tell our listeners around the world about the rest of your quest, the rest of your voyage.
Well, the voyage in life is always about learning to understand ourselves, not from an external perspective, but from an internal perspective. We always look in life for the idea of happiness. One of my teachers years ago looked at me and said this statement: how can you discover what you already have? And I found that extremely fascinating. And that led me on a journey in and of itself, Rob, that we are a lot greater than what we think we are. We are perfect, we are divine, and we are in the implicit idea of the Creator of who we are, because it created itself within us. And through my journeys, I just bumped up to that constantly and continually. And I can only say to people that people learn to accept who we are and then learn to embrace that idea. The embracing of self is the greatest thing that any human can ever do for and to themselves. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. Basically it comes to, if I understand what you're saying, and I believe it to be so, is that, we are who we make ourselves out to be. And if we can't love ourselves, no one else can love us.
That's absolutely perfectly stated, and I cannot state that enough. That if we cannot love ourselves, then no one else can love us. Because if we cannot love ourselves, then how can any human love another being? Not only that, how can they love the person that is seeking the love? It's learning to appreciate the idea of what has been created because of us. Life is because of us. It's not because of anything else. It's because of us. And it always comes down to the idea of how we see ourselves. If we look into a Tibetan principle in the idea of karma, the second principle says to us that you attract to you what you are, not what you want. That message now can be translated into this, that if you do not love you, then what you will do is you will attract people to you that will also not love you. If we have a fear of rejection, then what we will do is we will attract to us people who are going to do precisely that. The whole idea is that we can change it, we can shift it, we can turn it into something that we would prefer. You and I both know, Rob, you would rather be accepted. I'm going to say it's not important so much to you or I that people accept us. It's that they hear us and that they understand us and that they appreciate us. But most people are caught up in the idea, please accept me.
Yeah. My producer has asked me, Stephen, if you could talk a little louder, please, because we're having a bit of problems hearing you at times.
All right, I will do the best that I can.
All right, that's much better. Thank you. Stephen, tell me about your new book entitled A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible.
Well, and the idea of the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible is a simple concept. We follow the idea of religion, which is fine. That's okay. But the truth of the idea is the message of the Bible is no different than the Vedas. The Vedas is one of the most ancient texts in the world. The Vedas give us a message of our own divinity, that we are a creation of our own selves, if you will. And in that idea, in that creation of our own selves, we are the creation of our own divine. And the whole idea of the biblical text is to get us to understand that we are our own self-creation. And the metaphysical interpretation is actually about the cause. What causes all of the experiences that we have? And it's the cause that is the greatest thing. And here's the interesting thing. If we look at the idea of God, God is divine cause. We are the result of that karmic, let's say that karmic energetic that is put forth. It created through its own divine identity. And then we were given the opportunity to pick and choose, to decide what it is that we choose to be. No living thing in our reality has that opportunity other than the human. The human has the opportunity to be anything that it so chooses, but no other living thing can do that. Not one. A squirrel has to be a squirrel. A rose has to be a rose. But the human? Oh, my. And the whole idea of the biblical text is that we can be anything, absolutely anything that we so choose.
The karma, is that what goes around comes around, and payback can be rather hard on the person who does the ill deed in the first place?
Well, you know, when you ask about karma, we have an interesting perception of that. Karma is not about punishment, Rob. Karma is about keeping the playing field level, keeping it equal, keeping it, let's just say this. If you steal, you're going to be stolen from. If you have an affair, then you are going to lose the idea of trust in your own self. Karma is not a thing of, the way that we think it to be, in the idea of punishment. No. When we look at the idea of God through a metaphysical interpretation of the Bible, the Bible says it was cause, it created us, okay? And then the Bible goes on to say we are just like it, which means we create cause. Everything that you think, say, and or do has the opportunity of being created in your life. One of my teachers years ago asked me this question: what if the concept that you call God heard everything that you thought and considered that thought a request for that to be your next experience? Would you change the way that you think? My response immediately was, oh yeah, I would. And then what he said was good, for that is the truth of it. Well, all right. If the Creator hears all of our thoughts, and later in life, I have to also add, Rob, that I got my master's degree in religion and theology. And when you read in the book of Matthew says specifically this: there is no need to ask the Father for what it is that you choose, for it already knows what it is that you want. That echoed the same thing. We have it in our minds, and in our minds, we create our reality. We create our reality. In fact, one of the things that you suggested in the beginning of the show is, where does fiction, I'm paraphrasing, where does fiction and reality meet? It meets in the mind of the human. In the human, we create our experiences to where we put our focus, to where we put our interpretation, to where we put our acceptance and or denial of whatever, because that creates our experience. So when the Creator hears us, it says, okay, this is what you're choosing. A person with poverty consciousness, how can they have anything other than poverty? They can't. Why? Their consciousness is poverty. Their consciousness is poverty. So what they do is, we can perpetuate that, or we can change it. Does that make sense?
It really does, because I go by the mantra, if you confess it, you will possess it.
If you put it forth, it will come back to you.
Exactly.
In like identity. Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yes,
you know, and I believe in the Bible, it is referring to karma as, do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
That is actually the first law of karma. And you know, people think a lot of the times that Christ stated that as an original concept. No, he didn't. I know from what I was taught while in India that Christ was in India and that he was taught. Well, if he can be taught, so can we, if we learn to pay attention, if we learn to pay attention to our own selves. The idea of consciousness is not an illusion. It's not a joke. It's a reality. Consciousness is a discovery of the divine self, the divine witness of our own selves. And yet, we choose not to acknowledge it. We choose to be somewhat less than. And frankly, Rob, we don't have to. We are much greater. Are you familiar with a lady named Marianne Williamson?
That name rings a bell.
She is an author and speaker. She says this, and I think it's astounding. She says that she feels that we are more afraid of who we are in our smallness than who we are in our greatness. We can be incredible things if we so choose, but we choose to live in that smallness of our own selves because we don't understand the study of cause. It's not that we don't understand it, it's that we don't necessarily look at it. Cause is why creation, the idea of it, even happened. There was divine cause. Okay, there was a cause, and we are the result. One could easily state that in the idea of creation, there's divine cause, and we are the karmic return. We are the result of that idea of the divine. The divine says we are perfect, yet you, like I, we hear all the time, life isn't perfect, and neither is human. Really? That's not what God said. God said we are. And yet, we, for some reason, can't accept that. Now, we can look at that through two ideas. One is through arrogance, ego. The second is that it's just simply the truth. If we look at that through ego, then it becomes arrogance. But if we look at it as the idea of truth, then it becomes humbling, because it is the truth. We are the epitome of the divine in flesh to be divine expression. But we're choosing, obviously, when we look at our world today, to not choose that. We're choosing the opposite. We're choosing the less than. Go ahead.
And yet, once again, in the Bible, it says, and God created us in his image, in his likeness. Therefore, as I have read it over and over again, then we ourselves are gods. The perception of God, the reality of God, the will of God, the work of God, the inspiration of God. So nothing is impossible.
No. No, nothing is impossible other than the limitation of the human perception of limitation.
Yeah.
We keep ourselves in a limited field, and yet we don't have to. God and Christ both said the same thing, that we are just like it. Well, if we're just like it, then why are we choosing to live in limitation? It's because of the idea of three-dimensional reality. Three-dimensional reality is what we live in, but it's not who we are. We chose three-dimensional reality for a very specific reason, and that reason is very simplistic, to see divine expression and physical reality. That's its purpose. That's life's only purpose, is to see divine expression in physical reality, and we haven't achieved that yet.
How much of a factor is the control of humanity by misinterpretation of religious philosophies by those who have anything but religious or good intentions?
First off, I would say, all of the good intentions of religion, it was established 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And what people have done is they have followed blindly in the traditions of the religious teachings, but not in the truth of the teachings. Christ himself said it best when he stated that if the blind lead the blind, shall they both surely not fall in a ditch. Okay?
Right.
He was already giving us a warning, telling us that they were going to do that. And that's exactly what has been done. The idea of Paul, or Saul, when he was on the road to Damascus, he was against Christianity. He was against Christ. Christ, according to Paul, approached him on the road to Damascus and said, "Why do you persecute me?" And Paul supposedly said, okay, I'm making a mistake. I need to change this. But here's the truth. He was attempting to usurp the whole idea of divine nature. And the best way to change something or to shift something is from the inside. So he thought he would go inside, create an illusion that would lead people away from the original idea of divine being, to which religion has followed. I have no issue with religion. In India, they have a saying. The saying says, there are many paths to the one creator, and all paths are acceptable, and they are. Some are more limiting than others. The truth is, we were born from divine creation. The truth is, not only were we born from divine creation, we are that seed, we are that substance, and we can choose that if we so choose. Does that make sense, sir?
Yes, it does. And I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
What is our purpose?
What is the purpose of human?
Yes. Why are we here?
Oh, I love that question. If I were to address the most often asked question that I am, that I've ever had, it's that one, is who am I and why am I here? The answer is within the question. You are here to know who you are. Knowing is knowing that you are that divine substance, knowing that you are that divine creation, knowing that you are an aspect of the universe. If you were to take an overlay of the universe according to Hubble, and then you were to apply that to the human brain and the electronic functions of the human brain, they are exact mirrors, they are exact duplicates, they are images of each other. We are images of our reality, and our reality is created by us, through us, but by us, because of us. We are creators. We are creators. We're not uncreators. We create substance to which we deny. We deny ourselves. We deny that we are that divine idea. We deny and cannot accept that we are the reality and the cause of our reality. We don't own that, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're here to face, is personal ownership. Ownership of divine being. Every ancient text, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Vedas, Rob, it says the same story. The exact same story is in all of that. And yet we don't put it all together. And that's the reason I wrote a metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. Putting it all together. All of the different aspects of being. All of the different aspects of human. If there's one sin, and there really is only one, it's the idea of separation, exclusion of our own reality. I would have to ask you, Rob, how can you have exclusion to your own personal reality?
I don't know.
You can't. Because you are part and parcel of that reality. You are the chooser. You are the creator. You are the writer, the demonstrator, the director, the producer of your life. But most people don't want to see that.
Is it they don't want to see it, or they don't want to take the responsibility of it?
Responsibility.
It's easier to stick your head in the sand, and like so many people that I talk to, Stephen, and I'm sure you found this working with the Edgar Casey group, the ARE, that people are waiting for extraterrestrials to land and solve all our problems. Other people are waiting for Jesus Christ to return. Everyone is, in my opinion, or the majority of people, are just passing the buck, waiting for someone else to solve the problem, and therefore they don't have to take any responsibility for it.
Okay, extraterrestrials landing. All right, that that is a very viable reality. I'm going to say that first off, because I don't believe for 1 second that human is the only living thing in the entire cosmos. There is no way. There's an infinite number of universes, and there's an infinite number of planets, and the whole idea of human being the only living thing in all of that reality is pretty darned arrogant.
I agree.
All right. That being said, when we're waiting for things to come in and save us, whether it's a god, whether it's an extraterrestrial, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, gee willikers, wake up and smell the petunias, because that isn't going to happen. It'll happen only in one context, and that's if it comes to global annihilation. And the only reason I say that is because of something I learned as a Tibetan monk a long time ago. That's not going to happen because of that. The only thing to stop global annihilation would be extraterrestrials showing up going, wait a minute, what are you guys doing? And that changes everybody's focus and everybody's function and everybody's direction. So there's an infinite number of possibilities out there in our reality, an infinite number of possibilities.
All
Today, life is about achieving divine self. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, I was just going to ask you, so in your opinion, are the angels of yesteryear, or in the early days when the Bible was written by those who really didn't have a good feel of what this planet was all about, is it possible that the angels of yesteryear are the extraterrestrials of today?
No question. No question. We look at things, if we look at the idea of the creation of the Bible was created during a very superstitious time. We've referred to it as the Dark Ages.
Right.
All right. So what we did is we took one superstition and we replaced it with another that at the time appeared to be more viable. When we look at the idea of angels, what is that? I mean, really, if you ask anybody in the religious sector, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, I mean it in a pure sense, you ask anyone in the religious sector to describe or define an angel, they have great difficulty in doing it because they don't know how to, let's just say, describe something that's extra physical, if you will. And when we look at the idea of angels, angels can be a variety of things. They can be, you are familiar with the term spirit guides,
yes.
Are you not?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Spirit guides can be those angels. They are just simply a reference to higher understanding, higher knowledge, higher acquisition of knowledge. And what we do is we give it a physical context of an angel. When we look at the original spelling of the name of God, YHWH, my first question to everybody is how can you say that? It's not a word, but we have put vowels in it, and we have given it a word, as in Yahweh, Yevaheh, Jehovah, and then turned into God. All right. What if it's not a name? What if it's a mathematical, geometrical, sacred geometrical equation for the creation of life? That would make more sense. Why? Because that's what it is. And when we look at the idea of angels, we look at the idea of guides. These are just energies that help us understand our own selves. We could even go into the idea that what they are is an aspect of our own selves, which gives us a higher understanding. Does that make sense?
It does, Stephen, and I have to ask you if you can stand by. We have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Fascinating. Thanks very much for joining us, Stephen. Always a pleasure talking to you, sir.
Same here.
Exonation, my guest this hour, a good friend of the Exxon, Stephen HAIRFIELD. His website is www.hairfield.com, and he's the author of several books, with the newest one being A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible. And Stephen and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal, the science of parapsychology, and much more here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and on our radio site where you can listen to the X-Zone 24/7, 365, and the live show Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. until midnight, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Stephen HAIRFIELD, my guest, and I will be back on the other side of this break. Whatever you do, do not go away. We'll be right back. Began to demonstrate a metaphysical connection to the spirit world as a little girl. Her family noticed the connection, but it was a great-grandmother who told the family that Linnea was indeed gifted. The great-grandmother, who was also gifted, felt that Linnea had indeed inherited these attributes. It has been noticed that oftentimes such things are passed down through the generations. Linnea was also born with a caul, a thin white membrane across a newborn's face. Legend has it that if the baby is born with this caul, the child will have second sight, or what we call psychic abilities. Linnea's star does past, present, and future, and has the gift of prophecy. It is written within scriptures that if you were able to give factual information, and prophecies indeed come true, the gift indeed comes from the divine realm. Linnea Star does large interactive groups as well as private gatherings. For more information on Linnea Star or to contact Linnea for a one-on-one consultation, visit her website at www.linneastar.com. That's www.linneastar.com. Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him. How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
The Carl O. Helvey Holistic Cancer Foundation is a new nonprofit foundation that focuses on a holistic approach to cancer that includes physical, mental, spiritual, and political aspects. Cancer education, research, and care are provided for all types of cancer patients. You can listen to interviews with cancer doctors and survivors and read research on holistic aspects of cancer at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com. That's www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Welcome back, everyone. Stephen HAIRFIELD is our special guest this hour, www.hairfield.com. Stephen is the author of several books, with the newest one being A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible. And Stephen, always great talking to you. With all the different religious philosophies on this planet, and with walls and fights and wars continuing between certain philosophies and other philosophies and religions, how can we work towards a better world if we can't get everyone to agree on a religion or a philosophy or a being or a metaphysical state?
Well, I would say the first thing is there's no being, there's no real metaphysical state. The state of being is the state of human. Mm-hmm. We tend to look at this thing as, in the book of Genesis, Rob, it says that we are created in the image and likeness of God.
Yes.
But I think we've turned it into the idea that we have created God in our image and our likeness, and what we want to do is constantly disagree about it. It's the funny thing about disagreement. We can disagree all we want. Truth always goes through three stages. It really does. It goes through first resistance, and then it goes through rebellion and fighting against it, and then the third state is it's accepted as obvious. If we look at the world today, I would say we were in stage 2, that the whole world is in disarray and disagreement about the idea of a creator. The next thing I would say is hey, a creator. I remember the very first time I asked one of my teachers in India about the idea of creation, and they looked at me and said, creation, it's always been here. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm a Catholic, been a Catholic, and you're telling me this has always been here. How can that be? And then later, I kind of realized this, Rob. Isn't it interesting that the field of the physical sciences is attempting to discover the beginning, the middle, and the end of infinity? Now, I ask that question in sincerity, but the truth is, it's an absurd search, because in the idea of infinity, where would the middle be, where would the beginning be, and where would the end be?
You don't know.
The idea, well, it's infinity.
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes. And yet we're wasting our time in looking at something or looking for something that's totally, absolutely absurd. Even if you look at the idea of Genesis in the Bible, that's the beginning. You look at the idea of Revelation, which is a complete misinterpretation, as the end. Revelation is just an idea of something to be revealed, not an end. It's revealed, revelation. We see, we understand, we know. But we're always looking for that idea of the relationship between a beginning and an end. You are born, therefore you begin, and you transition, therefore you end. Really, in the idea of paranormal, and I know in your experience, Rob, you know that because transition happens, it's not an end, it's a change.
Exactly.
It's a new direction. But we are so caught up in the idea of beginning and endings that we attempt to find that, even in the illusion of the idea of infinity. That's absurd. How can anybody, an honest question, how can anybody limit the idea of God? I mean, who are you to do that? Where does that come from? When we look at the idea of God as the expression of our infinite self in our own being, and yet we choose to step back and say, I'm small. Really? I don't think God said that. God said we're not. God said we are infinite.
Well, let me ask you this, Stephen. Do you believe that there is only one God, and that one God is the God that everyone reveres?
No, I don't. If we look at the idea of the original expression and spelling of the idea of God, it's YHWH.
Yahweh.
Oh, yes. But my question to you, Rob, would be, how can you say that? There's no vowels in it.
I understand, and this is where you come up with the concept that it could be a mathematical equation.
It is indeed a sacred geometrical mathematical equation because it is not a name.
Then
it's an expression.
Then what
it's
does that equation equal?
An expression of being. Y is a negative charge. Okay. H is a positive charge, which represents Adam. W is a negative charge, which represents Eve. And the final H is physical form, which is a positive expression. They are two polarities. They are two energetics. That's what they are. It's not a name. It's an expression of divine substance, of two charges, just like on the poles of your battery in your car. You can't start your car without a positive and a negative pole.
You're right.
All right. It's not a name. It's a charge. It's an expression of being. And the expression of being came into substance because the polarities said, here are the charges, and this is the expression of being.
All right then. Let's just take that and hold it for a second. Then who did Moses receive the 10 Commandments from? An expression?
Oh, gosh. All right. First thing I'm going to say is everybody find a copy of the book of Jasher, Jasher. Jasher. Now, who's Jasher? Jasher is mentioned in the biblical text twice, which means he is important. And what they did is they quoted him. Jasher was actually the first staff bearer of Moses, according to ancient texts. But Jasher also said that Moses, when he went to the top of the mountain, he got really drunk on wine. And the 10 Commandments were for physical reasons, not spiritual or higher dynamic reasons. Jasher says that. And that's the reason I'm saying, don't listen to me. Go read Jasher. Jasher says it. And that's what happened. When we look at the idea of the 10 Commandments, the idea of God, think about something, is the expression of the epitome of love, unconditional love. is what it did. And it gave us life through that expression. And now it's going to give us conditions. Excuse me, that makes no sense. Does that make sense to you?
If you look into the Bible, Genesis, let me see here, Genesis 3:21, it says, the Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. My question is that if God is an expression, why then is he quoted as if he is a real person, or if he has a being, if he has the ability to do all these marvelous things? An expression can't do that.
Expression can, and it does. I got in trouble when I was going through my master's degree in School of Divinity.
Right.
And what I asked was this question. Excuse me. My undergraduate degree is in psychology, okay?
Yeah.
And what it says in Genesis is this: let us create human in our image and in our likeness. That's a plurality.
You're right. You're right. I agree with you.
All right. Okay. So in a plurality expression, that means that person is crazy. Well, I can't believe that God is crazy.
I agree with you. But, I have also toyed with the idea that where it said, and God said, let us make man in our image, it could be interpreted as the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Walk in the park. When we look at the idea of YHWH, you have the Holy Trinity. What you have is the Y represents soul, firstborn, according to the book of John. And then what you have is the first H, which represents thought, Adam, the guiding impetus, and then the second, or the W, represents Eve, the total guiding system of the physical form, and then the last form is H, which is physical body. So what you have is Father, Son, and Holy Ghost right there, sitting with mind, emotion, and physical form, portrayed in those three caricatures. But we don't see that. That's not a divine thing. That's just a physical representation of who we are, not what we are. Even if you look, one moment, even if you look, you read the first chapter of Genesis, and you would think that God created everything. It said it created everything in 6 days and then rested.
Right.
And yet you read the first statement in the second chapter, and here's what you would read. Yet nothing had been created. It's kind of like, wait a minute. You just said in the first chapter everything had been created, and now you're telling me nothing had been created? And what it did, God said, Adam, you named these things. And as Adam named these things, they became our reality. In other words, Adam represents logical thought for a three-dimensional reality. And nothing had been created in a three-dimensional reality because it wasn't three dimensions yet.
You see, I can understand the argument that you're presenting here. I really can, and I appreciate it.
Cool.
However, when you're looking at the mindset of those who were to have written the Bible, for example, we know that it was Moses who wrote the book of Genesis. This has been verified, clarified, stamped, approved by theologians around the world. I understand where you're coming from, but where did Moses get the ability to actually codify the Bible or the book of Genesis?
All right. First off, and I'm not going to question Moses, and I'm not going to question the theologians.
Right.
But first off, when we look at history, we always look at history through an interpretive point of value, that I can understand this. And what we want to do is we want to give people the opportunity of saying, I know this, I understand this, even like you querying me in this moment. And I think it's awesome because it stimulates an incredible conversation. But who was the conversation with Moses? How do we know for a fact? I mean, even if you go back to the idea of Jasher,
Right.
said Moses was kind of a drunk, and he went up on the mountain, and this is what he came down with. Now, I'm not saying that. I'm saying Jasher said this, who was his original staff bearer. That was millennia ago. All right, I wasn't there. I'm
Right.
not going to judge Moses. I'm going to let Moses be who he is. But I am going to be somewhat skeptical. For us to set in stone something that, in a sense, when actually pursued, well, I have worked with the Vedas. I've worked with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
I have read and studied the Nag Hammadi. I've looked into every ancient message that there ever is.
Why?
Or was.
What are you searching for?
I want to know why Moses said what he said, and why Moses did what he did. And everything is indicative of the fact that may not necessarily be the case, because in ancient linguistics, it's always metaphorical. It's not literal. In metaphorical language, we really have to look at it. Metaphorical language is an expression of an understanding.
Okay, let's look at a couple of phrases here from Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy 10, I believe, and it's let's go to 10:17. For the Lord your God is God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the alien, giving him food and clothing. And you are to love those who are aliens, for you yourselves were aliens in Egypt. So here we've got, in the book of Deuteronomy, saying, number one, God is the God of gods, which you and I agreed to earlier.
Okay.
Then why, throughout history, when it comes to those religious philosophies who teach the Bible as verbatim, is there only one God? Even though in a number of places within the Bible, it is very obvious that the creation, number one, is, and God said, let us create man in our image, our likeness. That is plural. The verses I read from Deuteronomy, plural. And this can be found throughout the Bible. And yet, people who go to churches, who go to tabernacles, who go to mega churches, basilicas, and the list goes on and on and on, are taught there is only one God. And yet, the religious leaders say that you have to believe the Word of God, the Bible. So if you read the Bible, you know there are inconsistencies with what you're being taught, and yet you're not supposed to question these inconsistencies. No wonder people are getting confused with religion and dropping out of churches like flies.
Well, Rob, first off, the idea is singular. If there's one sin, it's the sin of separation. And what all of those texts are teaching us is the illusion and the idea of separation, that there is more to it than what we understand. No, there isn't.
So what you're saying is the Bible is basically teaching us about a great deception. Not an illusion, a deception. So we're being deceived.
Yes.
So if the Bible is telling us that there are, that this is a deception or an illusion, how do we know that anything that can be taken from within the Bible or religion, including God, is not a deception or an illusion, that there is no God? And we are, as science believes, the result of natural progressions of a species on a planet. Bang.
Okay, first off, we've got, and I love this topic. Gosh, we could go for hours in this, my friend. And that's simply this, that look, they're looking for the missing link. Have they ever found it? The answer is no. They haven't. The truth is they never will, because there's no missing link.
Exactly.
All right. There was human, and that's it. There was human.
Yeah.
And human, its destiny is to evolve into its own self, not because of the idea of God. God is a limitation. God is something that we're taught that you cannot be. I mean, how many times have we heard that, Jesus, there's only one, yet Christ himself said that you are just like me and you can do these things too. I would rather go along with what that higher dynamic says, that I can be just like it and learn to operate in that dynamic as just like it. And that's the equation, is operating it, is living it. It's not thinking it. It's, we can we can stand in so much in the arena of limitation. I'm not against religion. I really am not. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rephrase that. I'm not against the Bible. I'm not against the Bible, but I am against religion, because religion creates the idea of limitation.
Steve, we've only got about 2 minutes left, and
Sure.
I love having you on the show. We're going to have you back on in the very near future to continue this fascinating conversation. But let me ask you this, my friend. Is it possible that society has outgrown the need for any religion or religious philosophy?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have. We are facing that window right now.
Yeah.
We are the dynamic of the creation of self. We are the dynamic of the creation of self, based on soul. And that comes out of the book of John. John tells us that. We are the firstborn soul. Yet, we forget, and we are body only. No, it's greater than that. Much greater. We are divine in flesh. Go for it, sir.
Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always a great pleasure talking to you. I wish you much success with your new book, A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible. Now, where can our listeners get a copy? Because Christmas, that holiday when Jesus was born, is coming up very shortly. And I'm always out there looking to keep an eye out for a good gift for the Exo Nation to pass on to people, and I believe your book would be one.
First off, Jesus was actually born in the month of May.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, I know that.
All right. Not in December. That's a pagan thing, but you can always go to Amazon.com. No question.
Stephen
Rob,
here.
It's a pleasure, sir.
Sir, the pleasure has been all mine. Until the next time we talk, which will be in the very near future, as you know, because you're a psychic. My best wishes to you, safe travels, and always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light, my good friend.
I always shall, and you do the same, sir, because the light in the sky is where we reside in the first place.
Good night, Stephen.
Thank you, sir.
Exo Nation, my guest this hour has been the one and only Stephen HAIRFIELD. His new book, A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible. His website, www.hairfield.com. Now, I'll be back on the other side of the news as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, to the family and friends of Jan Stark, and especially his lovely wife, Linda. Jan Stark, the founder and the original owner of the Starcom radio network, passed away. And our thoughts and prayers are with him. He was a great broadcaster, a visionary, and a personal friend, and a great friend and supporter of the X-Zone and the X-Zone Nation. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.